So probably the most common question that I get asked by students is, what do I expect in your writing? And I try to be pretty clear when we start the course in the first week of class to provide you guys, a pretty clear idea. There's a grading rubric that can be located in the course materials section. My expectations for APA format are found in the course materials section. I give quite a few examples in the main forum as to different ways to cite and reference things. And I also provide that, APA academic writing discussion question in most of my courses as well. So you guys can actually not only ask questions about APA writing or academic writing, but you can also get your weekly participation credit when you ask those questions. So, I try to make things as open as I can to you guys for how I grade, but there's always still some inevitable questions. So what I've done here is I've created a paper to grade and show you, exactly what I do when I grade a paper, and exactly the kind of things I look for. Now, just as a couple disclosures here. First of all, this paper is completely and utterly made up. It is 100% fake. There's not a single source used in it that's actually a source. I made them all up myself. I didn't want it to be about content. I wanted it to be about, how it's written and stuff like that. So it is completely made up. And another thing is that there may be some things that I don't cover that are within my expectations. So this is not all inclusive. This is just kind of the most common things I run into. So you can see here, we're on the title page of the paper, and we can see that it's called "Attracting Hummingbirds to Your Backyard." And something you can see pretty clearly is that the title is located up here in the header, and I also include the page number. Now you may ask, but Bruce, you don't have running head. Well, that's relatively easy to explain. You guys are welcome to use the words running head in your header. I'm not going to count off for it. It is a part of APA formatting, but sometimes we have to go a little deeper into APA formatting and read exactly why we're using that. And if we read the APA manual about the whole idea of a running head, we find out that it's a publication tool. And really all of APA is a publication tool, but that running head in particular is built for publishers. It's built for sending that article out for publishing. Since we're not publishing our work, it's not necessary. Like I said, you're more than welcome to use it, but you don't have to. So, your choice. You'll also see here that my title page block, it's only got 5 lines on it. And a lot of you guys will have like 1,600 lines of miscellaneous stuff on your title page. Now, I'll tell you, I have taken these 5 lines directly from the university's sample paper. It says title, name of author, class. You can make it the class name, you can make it the abbreviation, whatever. Date, in this format. It specifically says in this format, mind you. So January 28th, 2099, that's when I wrote this paper, right? And then the name of the instructor for the course. So my name for this course, your other professor's names, or your other instructor's names, whatever, for other courses. It says nothing else. It doesn't say university name, it doesn't say, week of the assignment, nothing else in there. Actually, if we look at APA, in actual APA formatting, it's 3 lines. It's going to be name of article, author, and institution. But once again, that's a publishing standard. That's built for publishing. We're writing these papers for classes, so there's a little bit of adaptation that needs to be made because we're writing them for classes and not for publishing. So bear that in mind. This is, according to the university, the correct way to format your title page, according to the university. Like I said, if you want to use that running head, that's great. If you don't use it, I'm not going to count off because it's a publishing tool. As we go into the next page, you're probably seeing that something's missing. Well, some of you will point out that there's something missing. That is the abstract. Once again, the abstract is a publishing tool, and according to APA formatting, it is not necessary unless you are publishing the article or unless your instructor specifically asks for it. So here's my feelings about abstracts. You're welcome to write an abstract if you want. It will not count as your word count. It will not count as your introduction because it is not an introduction. It is something completely different. So bear those two things in mind. You still have to have an introduction, and it will not count towards your word count if you do an abstract. So, now from this point forward, I'm pretty much going to mark this paper up exactly like I would mark up a paper as it were submitted to me. So kind of bear that in mind. I'll give you a couple things that I'm looking at. First of all, I don't go too far with the headers, but I do typically look to see that these headers up here, they're carried on from page to page, and that you used the header function in your word processor and not just put it on the first line. There are specific requirements as to where this goes according to APA. If you simply use the header function and make sure that the title of your paper is on the same line as the page number, you'll be fine. Next, you'll see that the title of the paper appears on the first line. This is APA format. The title of your paper must appear on the first line of your paper. I know that it's on your header, and I know that it seems redundant, but that's the way APA formatting works. So, typically what I do is I kind of glance through your paper, and then I go back and read it a little more fully. Because this is broken up into different pages, that's a little more difficult to do, so we're just going to read it through. The first thing I see here is this, introduction. You have to have an introduction, not saying you don't. However, in APA formatting, the introduction does not get a heading. So you would leave out the words introduction there and simply go from the title of your work right into your introduction paragraph. And when you do that, it automatically signifies to your reader that that is your introduction, because APA expects that there's an introduction in all of your works. So, we move on a little bit. Now we know this paper is about hummingbirds. So we say, hummingbirds are a welcome addition to your backyard birding experience. Not only will they provide excellent viewing experiences for your friends and family to enjoy, they may also help your garden and flowers thrive. Attracting hummingbirds to your backyard can also help attract other nectar-feeding animals to your backyard, providing, that's a spelling error, even more viewing opportunity. Understanding a little about how these birds thrive in their natural environment will help you attract them, another spelling error, to your backyard while creating a natural atmosphere. Now, I intentionally wrote this introduction with very little errors. I picked 2 spelling errors that I put in here, and we'll talk about them in a second, but let's talk about the introduction as a whole. First of all, your introduction needs to introduce your paper. And what you're going to find out is that what I talked about in this introduction really provides groundwork for what's laid out in the paper. Now, if you saw the assignment criteria for this, assuming there was one, but like I said, I just made this up literally in my head today, you would probably see that none of the assignment criteria ended up in my introduction. So it's not necessarily appropriate, nor will it be accepted, for you to write an introduction where you just take the 4 bullet points from the assignment criteria and make a sentence for each one. So if the assignment criteria says, you know, why should you attract hummingbirds to your backyard? You shouldn't say, this paper will cover why we should attract hummingbirds to the backyard. We want to try to write in a style similar to what we read on a regular basis. And what I've done here is provide you guys a really good basis for how to introduce a paper without ever mentioning I, we, us, or in this paper. Those are kind of the 4 things you really want to try to avoid. Now, I provided 2 spelling errors in this section, one of which just a spelling error to show you that if you have a spelling error, I'm going to mark it with SP. The other one is a spelling error that, in the first spelling error, the providing here, it likely underlined that in Word and showed you that that was a misspelling. But this one here, not so much. Then is a word, so it wouldn't underline it. It really meant to be them there. So that's just something to kind of bear in mind. You need to proofread your work just to make sure that you're catching all of those errors. You can't just trust Word to catch everything. So as we go in here to the second paragraph, you'll see we have a heading properly formatted in APA format. This is a level 1. I'll write that down for you. Level 1 heading. Now, there's multiple levels of APA headings. There's also various particular rules about how to use those different levels. I'm going to go out and say you could probably write every paper in this course only using level 1 headings. However, the university's writing requirements require that you use headings, so please use them. The first thing I see here is this. You can see that there's a huge indent here. And I don't know why, but the indents should only be 0.5 inches, half an inch, according to APA. And that's probably how I would mark that, a circle there with 0.5 inches or something like that. I may write a little note just to explain that, hey, you got a double indent there or something. You have something going on. Once again, I only hit tab once here, but something deep in the way I've got Microsoft Word set up, for some reason, indented that twice. I don't know why. It happens occasionally. I want you to be aware that it happens. So then I would go on and read a little bit. So the best way to attract hummingbirds will be to accurately simulate or recreate their natural environment. Hummingbirds feed naturally on the nectar from flowering plants. This nectar is sweet to the taste and is similar chemically to simply dissolved sugar water. Now, hummingbirds feed naturally on the nectar from flowering plants is something that needs a citation. This nectar is sweet to the taste and similar chemically to simply dissolved sugar water also needs a citation. And in this case, both of them came from the same place. So technically, I'm all right here. But you still may see written on your paper a CR here. And it doesn't necessarily mean I deducted points. I'm just telling you that for clarification purposes, it would be appropriate to put a citation there. And the reason is, a parenthetical citation like that, it can cover more than one sentence. That's not necessarily the problem. The problem is that this citation here is covering a sentence that talks about chemical compounds. And this sentence up here is talking about, just simply talking about how hummingbirds feed. Because they're really 2 different subjects, an additional citation there is good for clarification purposes. Even if it's the same citation, it can still be Klingon 2010. and get away. That's fine. So just bear in mind, sometimes you may need citations to prove your work. Then we go on, we're starting here. In plants, this nectar is stored in the middle of the flowering section called the perianth. And then I cite Walker of 1994. I didn't know that. I had to look it up. So that's why I put Walker 1994. That's a good way to use an additional source to kind of back up or clarify or provide additional information. You know, this Klingon source, that's my primary source for this paper. I'm kind of summarizing what he's talking about here. But that Walker source is a good one to put in there. So then we go on, we're starting here. Storing nectar is plants' reproductive way of hummingbirds. Okay, now, you're going to see, if you write a sentence like this, you're probably going to see awkward or doesn't make sense. And you're probably laughing. If you're watching this video, you're probably laughing a little bit at that sentence. Storing nectar is plants' reproductive way of hummingbirds. It doesn't make any sense. And most of you can pretty clearly tell it doesn't make any sense, but you would be surprised how many times I'll read a sentence like that throughout this course. One that doesn't make any sense at all. So, if you see awkward grammar, sentence doesn't make any sense, you need to read through that and figure out where your problem is. You know, I'm not going to rewrite your sentences for you, but you've got something going in there grammatically or just in the way your sentence is built that it really doesn't make sense and it needs to be reviewed. So then we move on. We get hummingbirds have special sensors in their eyes that help attract them to bright colors. Oh, that's not colors, that's collars. Once again, a word that wouldn't show up in Word's spell check. Bright colors of flowers containing the nectar they consume. There are plants that do contain nectar, but do not have brightly colored flowers. But hummingbirds are generally not physically equipped to extract their nectar. This is probably a little bit of awkward grammar. This could be rewritten in a way that wasn't quite so awkward to read. So think about that a little bit. If you see that mark, you know, just kind of go through and reread it. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it's awkward. Then we say, we're starting here, 10% of all plants contain nectar that hummingbirds are physically equipped to consume. Okay, this is what you would see here. You would see 10%. There are ways specifically laid out in APA for how to write numbers. Here's an example of them. Anytime we're talking about a statistic, we are to use the numeral values for the number. So if you talk about 10% or 300 out of every 400 youth, you're going to physically write the numeral values of the numbers, regardless of any other rules in APA. And there are some that talk about, and we'll talk about them a little later, about when to write the number out in letters and when to use the numerals. But you would see 10% there. Don't try to cheat your word count by writing out the word percent. It doesn't really help you. The other thing you're going to see at the bottom of this is probably this. Citations. You have a whole paragraph here with no citations at all. Probably not the best deal. And there's a lot of information here that needs citations. As a matter of fact, really all this information needs citations. And if it all comes from the same source, one citation at the end might be appropriate. But if it doesn't come from the same source, you may need to break that up a little bit. So where did I find out that hummingbirds have special sensors in their eyes to help attract them to bright colors, flowers containing nectar? Put a citation there. Where did I find out that there are plants that do not have brightly colored flowers? Put a citation there. Where did I find out that 10% of all flowers contain the nectar that hummingbirds are equipped to consume? put the letter there. Now, looking at my sources, since the Walker source appears to be about plants and the Klingon source appears to be about hummingbirds, I would say this first sentence is probably a Klingon citation. The second sentence is probably a Walker citation, and the third sentence could possibly come from either, but it's probably a Klingon citation as well. So the key is that you need to make sure you're using citations to back up what you say. You and I would have no authority to say this information without proving that, it's actually true. So as we go on, we're going to see another heading written in Level 1 APA. That's good. The key to attracting hummingbirds to your birdwatching area is creating an environment suited for their physical characteristics and containing food for them to consume. The easiest way to accomplish this is to plant brightly colored flowers throughout your property, but particularly in areas where you wish to attract. According to Klingon, this is an example, by the way, of an inline citation. The other ones are called parenthetical citations. An example of an inline citation. According to Klingon, hummingbirds are attracted to almost any flower that contains bright colors that their eyes are attracted to. Okay. The sentence is a little awkward, but it's a quote, so as long as it's a quote, that's fine. But what we have to look at is, and what you would likely see here if you quoted this, you would probably see unnecessary quote. And, I say that because you got to wonder, what exactly does this quote do for my paper? Hummingbirds are attracted to almost any flower that contains bright colors that their eyes are attracted to. Okay, well, it does tell us a little bit of information, but you know what? It really tells us kind of the same information we talked about earlier. And earlier we paraphrased it. So it would probably be just as appropriate, if not more appropriate, to paraphrase it down here if we were going to include it. So what I'm trying to get across here is that if you're going to use a quotation in your work and not paraphrase or just use a citation to support what you're saying, you need to make sure that quote has a specific purpose. This quote really has no specific purpose. It doesn't say anything that I can't say as an individual paraphrasing and providing a citation. And what you'll kind of see from me is that you can write all your papers in my courses without using any quotations whatsoever. Quotes are kind of a crutch way to get citations into a paper when we're not really sure how to use citations. And it's not really your fault that we use it as a crutch. It's kind of taught in the high schools now. That's how we teach people how to implement citations at first. The best way, I think, to know how to implement a citation is if it's not your information, it needs a citation. And speaking of that, as we come back here to the beginning of the paragraph, we're probably going to find we need some citations in there. Now this citation down here, this cannot cover the citations in front of it. It can't cover the inline citation covers things after the citation. The parenthetical citation covers things before the citation. So this inline citation doesn't count for anything up here. So the key to attracting hummingbirds to your birdwatching area is creating an environment suited to their physical characteristics and containing food for them to consume. Okay, it's logical that you just got that from your research, but the best way to do that, the best way to prove this is just to make sure there's a citation there. It doesn't have to be exactly what the person said, but if you're getting that information from that person, put the citation in there. The easiest way to accomplish this is to plant brightly colored flowers throughout your property, but particularly in areas you wish to attract. Now, again, you need a citation here, so you're going to see CR, and you're going to see CR here. But if these two came from the same source, again, a citation here is probably appropriate. You probably don't need to have both. As we go down a little farther, you'll see only 10%. That's what you would see me mark. You have to have the percent sign. We can't use just percent. Of all flowers contain nectar that hummingbirds can actually extract and consume. Because of this, you may consider an artificial source of food to attract hummingbirds to your yard. Wait, where did this information here come from? Where did the only 10% of all flowers come from? Need a citation there. Because of this, you may consider an artificial source of food to attract hummingbirds to your yard. You don't need a citation there. You're just interpreting the information you've provided in your paper, so you don't need a citation. Many retailers contain feeders for hummingbirds that will do an acceptable job of attracting them to your environment. And then a citation. It's great. It's borderline whether it needs one, but you probably got that citation. You probably got that information from him anyway, so it's best to put it in there. So, these feeders contain bright colors that hummingbirds are naturally attracted to. Maybe need a citation there, maybe not. I'd probably let you get away with that. Nectar to fill these feeders can be created by simply adding 1 cup of sugar to 1 cup of water. Now wait. Why did we do this different here? Why did we do 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of water? Well, I did it on purpose, that's why. But you'd be surprised, some people, if they don't know which way to do it, they just do it both ways. APA has guidelines for how to write numbers. If the number's less than 10, you write the number out, okay? Unless, and there are some key, and this is why getting the APA manual is kind of important. There are some key differentiations as to when we don't write the number out. If it's just 1 cup, 1 page, 6 pages, something like that, we're always going to write the number out. So you'd probably see me marking here O-N-E, because we should have written that out according to APA. Once again, this is why getting the APA manual kind of important, because you really need to know when those variations occur, and the only way to do that is to get the APA manual. Or look it up. There are some sites you can look it up on. But anyway, nectar to fill these feeders can be created by simply adding 1 cup of sugar to 1 cup of water in a pot on your stove and slowly bringing to a boil. Citation, good. Once it has cooled, it can be added to the feeder, and all that is left is to wait for your hummingbirds to begin coming to your feeder. No citation. No citation needed. It's my information. It's the writer's information. I'm interpreting. So now we get into the conclusion. Now, this conclusion is broken off in pages, so we're going to do the best we can here. But the first thing I look at, and I would have caught this in my initial skim through, is once again we have that big indent here. So you'd see 0.5 inches there. In conclusion, I just want to say that it is impossible for you to attract hummingbirds to your backyard. No first person. That's the note you would see. No first person. Don't write in first person. Do not use I. Do not use we. It's unnecessary. You don't need to do it. And you'll see, I'll provide you a good example. I've written this conclusion one specific way. I've actually written another conclusion that'll give you a good example of how to write a conclusion. It is assumed that what you write in your paper is your opinion. So you don't need to say I or we or anything like that. So in conclusion, I just want to say that it's impossible for you to attract hummingbirds to your backyard. Not only are there not any feeders available to attract them with artificial food, but the plants that attract them are not easy to plant and will only grow in nature preserves, not your backyard. We are wasting our time trying to attract hummingbirds to our backyards. You should just go to your local nature preserve or watch videos about them. Okay, let's talk about this conclusion a little bit. What's wrong with it? Think about it for a second. Let's think about what is wrong with this conclusion. Some of you may not have caught what's wrong with it, but think about it. Try to get the answer right here. Even maybe pause the video until you figure out what's wrong with it. Here's what's wrong with it. And many of you are probably going, well, that conclusion doesn't make any sense because you didn't talk about that at all in your paper. And you're right, it doesn't make any sense. What's wrong with that conclusion is it's not supported by anything I wrote. And you're probably thinking, well, I would never do that. But, you know, you would be surprised how many times I read a paper that provides a bunch of evidence saying one thing, and then at the end says, but I don't think we should follow any of that. Well, the problem with this conclusion isn't necessarily that the point that it makes. The problem with the conclusion is that it's unsupported. If you want to come up with this conclusion, then you need to write a paper that provides evidence that there's no way to actually attract hummingbirds to our backyards. I didn't provide that evidence, therefore I really can't come to this conclusion. So, in juvenile justice courses, I find this a lot. It's really prevalent in the juvenile justice courses. We have some very big time opinions about things that may not be true, particularly when we talk about that week, the later on in the course assignment about the three or four different programs. Here, pick one of these programs, research it, come back and tell me whether or not it works, why it doesn't work, whether there's any evidence. You need to provide evidence to support all of that. And then your conclusion needs to support that evidence. And you'd be surprised how many people write a paper on DARE or Scared Straight or Boot Camp, and they show all this. Well, according to the research, people that go to Scared Straight are more likely to commit crimes than people that don't go to Scared Straight. Or according to the research, DARE has no additional impact over not doing anything at all. And then in their conclusion, they say, but we should keep DARE, or we should keep Scared Straight, even though people are more likely to commit crime after they go through these programs. We should keep them anyway, because if it helps one person, it was worth it. Well, that's a very, very dangerous mentality to take. How many people do we hurt in the process of trying to help just one? So this is kind of an example of how you need to support your conclusions. And then I wrote the conclusion down here a little bit better. This would be a more appropriate conclusion for the paper. Hummingbirds are an excellent addition to your backyard birding experience. Not only do they add beautiful and unique birds to your backyard, but the plants used to attract them can provide natural beauty to your backyard as well. Attracting these birds can be done easily by adding appropriate plant life to your backyard or adding attractive artificial feeders to your backyard area. This provides methods of attracting these birds for all skill levels and even those who do not necessarily have a green thumb. That's a great conclusion. I never said I never said we, I never said I think, it's understood that this is my opinion. So it's not necessary for me to say I. It really goes back and covers some of the key points. And it comes to a conclusion that, if you've read this conclusion, even though you haven't seen why this conclusion was made, you could understand what the paper's about. So then we go on into your reference page, and you can see that we still have the header on top that continues, and that's fine, that's good. And we see references. We may have an extra space here. I don't know. It does look like there's an extra space up there. And then we see I use 2 references. Now, key thing about reference pages. If it's in your reference page, it has to have a citation. And if it's cited in your paper, it has to have a reference. If there's no citation or no reference, either, it's wrong. And it can actually lead you kind of into plagiarism, so you need to be very careful. So we see I had 2 references. They're in alphabetical order. I followed APA's guidelines here, right? Clean, comma, Bruce, period, then the year, then the title of the paper, the city it was published in, and then the name of the publishing company. Like I said, this is all made up. Now, on the second source, I made the assumption that I actually got this source from the university library, because you guys are going to be using the library in my courses. So if you want to get more familiar with it, now's a great opportunity, because you're going to have to use it for this class. So the Walker source, we're going to assume I got from the library, but it's still being cited as a book, whether it was an article or a book. I mean, I don't really know. Walker, James, 1994, plants that contain nectar Cambridge, Massachusetts. Notice Cambridge is a known city of publishers, so the Massachusetts is not necessary. And University Press. I just kind of made an assumption there. Let's say this was from the library. This link here, this link, sorry, I see a lot of people put it in their papers. You should never have this link in your paper under any circumstance, and here's why. If you put this link in your paper, what I want you to do is copy that link, log out of University of Phoenix, and then go back in to your web browser and paste that link in and see what you get. What you're going to find out is you can't get anywhere. This is a dead link. It's not a permalink. It could lead you to a different article, potentially, but even more so if you don't have a University of Phoenix account or a ProQuest account, you're not going to be able to access this. So do not put this link here. If you get something from the university library, it is not a reference to a website. It is a reference to a book or a reference to an online database. And the only time you're going to provide that website is if that journal or whatever is available all the time through a website. So if you did the American Journal of Psychiatric Medicine, and there was a website for the American Journal of Psychiatric Medicine, then you could put the homepage for the American Journal of Psychiatric Medicine there. But we're never going to put, if we get something from the library, we're never going to put retrieved from, we're never going to put this link. And in week one, I definitely discuss this in a little more detail and provide you guys an example of how and why to reference things the way they are. So make sure you follow that. Now, that being said, this is how I grade papers. And what you see here, as far as markings on your paper, is pretty much what you're going to get back on your papers from me. You're going to get a PDF file back from me that's going to actually have markings on it. It's also going to have text boxes, where if I wrote something out that's a little more in-depth, I'll use a text box. It's also going to have audio comments. So on the first page, it's going to have 1, 2, 3, depends on what I had to say, 60-second audio comments, commentary. I'm going to talk about specific things, give you specific ideas of what was good, what was bad, so on and so forth. And then on your first page, you'll also have your grades. So that's actually how you'll get your papers back from me. I do recommend that if you don't have Adobe PDF Reader, you download it. It's free. The university requires it. So I would go ahead and download that and have it. I know that if you use, some PDF readers don't open the annotations inside PDF documents. So you need to make sure that you have one that'll open all those annotations and that you're reading them all. So, writing guidelines within the university are unique, and the reason they're unique is because University of Phoenix uses a kind of a long-term learning process. It's called progressive learning. So Phoenix uses progressive learning, and it really is a self-taught method to learn writing, where you have to utilize the resources that are available to you in the CWE, the workshops, so on and so forth. But the big thing that most students don't understand about this progressive system is, as you move forward in courses, the expectations for your writing are going to drastically increase every course. Your courses in your first year sequence, your second year courses, they may not have pointed out some of the APA things or some of the writing things that I'm going to point out. They're not supposed to. Well, they're supposed to point them out. They're supposed to give you a little bit more of a break on your grade than you would in this course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you kind of how I do, I'm sorry, some of the resources out there for you to look at. So essentially, I've logged in, and I'm going to go to the library. Maybe turn my pen off. Sorry. And there we go. Just wanted to reload. Sorry. So I'm going to go into the library, and I'm going to go to the Center for Writing Excellence. And by the way, over here, if you don't use plagiarism review and grammar review, you're doing something wrong. You are required to submit your papers in this course to the plagiarism reviewer. And I do that because if I find a small mistake or even a bigger mistake that is an honest mistake, I want you to know that, I want to know when I grade your paper that you've seen that mistake and that you kind of understand what's going on. So just kind of make sure you're using that Center for Writing Excellence, particularly the plagiarism checker. It's good at catching things. It doesn't catch everything, but it's good at catching things. And bear in mind, that's not the only thing I'll use either. So let's click on the Center for Writing Excellence. Whoops. Sorry, I went too far. And then over here, we're going to have Writing and Style Guidelines, APA. So we use APA in this school. So you're going to see this page. This is the writing guidelines for the university. We're going to go through them here real quick. First thing I want to point out is that the university recommends that you purchase the APA reference manual. Do it. You should do it. It's a very smart move. You'll use it, trust me. You'll learn a lot of things from it that you might not have known existed. So use it. And it talks about how, we use APA and, the final standard for everything. As far as I'm concerned, if you can format something in your paper that meets the standards of that Gregg manual or the APA manual, and you can point out to me that, hey, look, I saw on page 6 of the APA manual it said to do this, then great. I have no problem with that. If you can't say you did it based on that APA manual, and you should be able to really go to any instructor and say, listen, this was in the APA manual. Unless they specifically told you to do it otherwise, I followed APA. But you can't do that if you don't have the manual. So we see here, writing and style expectations by degree level. And then literally we have 100 to 299 for associates. This is the associate degree. Anything in the associate's program falls under this. So essentially, you don't have to format your tables and graphs with any preference. You don't have to format your headings with any preference. You don't even really have to use headings. You have to use in-text citations and reference pages. Double space, 12-point font, 1-inch margin, Times New Roman, Arial, or Courier font. And then title page contains paper title, student name, course, due date, and faculty name. That's what was on my paper. That's the guideline I followed. In the bachelor's degrees, you can see things start to increase. So in the 100 level courses, very similar to the associate courses. In the 200 level courses, we start to contain graphs and stuff. Sorry, zooming in. And then we see that we need to use in all of our papers one level of heading, okay? I don't know how many students, when I mark off because you didn't use headings, come back and say, the university doesn't have any rule that says I have to use headings. It's right here in the writing guidelines. So bear that in mind. Intellectual property, it can contain some formatting errors. That's fine if this were a 200 level course. And then may contain formatting errors, Times New Roman, Arial, Courier, 1-inch margins, 12-point font, so on and so forth. And then you see the title page doesn't change. It's the same. In bachelor's level courses, it says for 300 to 399, and that's what, 300 and 400 level courses are where most of your criminal justice courses are going to fall. It says that you use tables, graphs, and figures consistent with APA guidelines. If you're going to include a table or graph, make it consistent with APA. I'm going to step right out right now and say that you probably don't need to use tables or graphs in any of your papers, but you're welcome to. If you do, make sure they're formatted in APA. Headings. Use multiple levels of headings that may contain minor errors consistent with APA guidelines. Now, minor errors is not, I don't know how to do it, so I'm just going to make up my own way. That's not a minor error. Minor error might be I didn't capitalize all the letters in the title, or I didn't bold the title. A minor error. Or my title was way too long, my heading was way too long, something like that. And then you can see that title page and the format are all the same. And then in your 400 level courses, which you guys are all probably getting to, if you're not already there, uses tables consistent with APA. Accurately uses multiple levels of heading consistent with APA guidelines. Intellectual property is cited and formatted consistent with APA guidelines. Accurate formatting with few, if any, formatting errors. And then in the master's degree level, there really is no progressive learning. You should be able to write at that level when you get there. So I wanted to show you guys this to kind of show you that we use a progressive writing tool here, and we expect that you show progress in your writing as you go forward. So make sure that you're showing that progress, that you're showing that you're actually, moving forward. There is some APA information in Center for Writing Excellence. You may find this hard to follow. You may find this hard to find information in. You may not. I will say that in the sample paper, one thing that's kind of nice is that it contains instructions for how to do your hanging indents on your references and how to do the running head at the top of your paper and stuff like that. So there are some good tips in here. There are also some things that I think some people get confused on in there. Other than that, in the tutorial and guide section, I'll point this out. There is a plagiarism tutorial. If you click on it and go to it, it gives you a lot of information. So, if you go into the plagiarism guide, there's lots of different topics in here. But one thing that if you don't understand plagiarism, take this Avoiding Plagiarism Mastery Test. And if you have questions, ask. I'm happy to help. There's communities in Phoenix Connect that help with writing, and there are resources within CWE for you to ask for assistance. Ask for help. Don't get caught plagiarizing and say you didn't know you were plagiarizing, because that won't be acceptable. So I hope this gives you, I know it's kind of long, but I wanted to make sure that you got an idea for how I grade papers, the kind of things I look for, and maybe this points you in the right direction as you get started. Like I say, if you've got questions, use your individual forum. If you've got questions that you think might benefit the whole class, by all means, post them in that DQ4. Almost all of my classes use discussion question 4 as a writing or APA discussion question. Use it. It'll help you out.